I'm John Batchelor, Mary Kissel, editorial board of the Wall Street Journal. This is Kissel's traveling music, of course, off to Australia, because we're joining the new Human Rights Commissioner of Australia, Tim Wilson, a man whom we thought was a mild-mannered classical liberal, serving the people and the Institute of Public Affairs in Melbourne. However, he's been transformed, or aspirationally, prospectively transformed, because he begins his new post February 18th, 2014, as the Human Rights Commissioner for Australia. Mr. Wilson, congratulations and a very good morning to you. And it's exciting. And I first want to establish Human Rights Commissioner and your relationship to government, because you have a different governance than we have here in the United States. Are you a member of cabinet? Are you independent of cabinet? Good morning to you.
Good morning, and the short answer is I am independent of cabinet. I'm appointed on the advice of the government to the Governor General, who's the representative of the Queen, and she appoints me for a period of 5 years, and I'm independent of the cabinet process and the political process.
So, Tim, let me get this straight. The Crown appoints you, and you cannot be fired.
That's basically it. I'm sure the Crown can remove me, but I've been advised, and I haven't checked to confirm it, but I have been advised from very good sources that technically I can't be fired for the next 5 years, which is a very strange position to be in.
You were chosen by the Abbott government. Did the Prime Minister participate in the choice?
I don't know exactly what the processes were behind the scenes, but what happens is the Attorney General, the Chief Law Officer of the country, makes a recommendation to Cabinet. Cabinet then goes on and considers it, which includes the Prime Minister, and then they make the recommendation to the Attorney General.
Wonderful. I'm certain that it's a positive thing, although this can't be fired stuff, Mary. I don't know.
It's all very murky.
For a classical liberal, this must make you nervous, Tim.
No, I think it's going to be a fascinating time, because the government has appointed me with the full knowledge that I am going to disagree with them at times,
right.
And that's what the role of the Commissioner is. And so they wanted somebody to stand up for a traditional approach to human rights, about the importance of free speech, about the rights of the individual, freedom of association, and other rights, and that even when they become a nuisance to the government, they'll still stand up passionately in their defence, and they knew that full well when they appointed me.
So, Tim, we had Janet Albrechtsen, a columnist for The Australian, into the Wall Street Journal just this past week, talking about your appointment, and she called you the Freedom Commissioner. Is that just a nickname, or is that something that you've been tasked with to do to stand up for these freedoms?
Well, no, technically I am the Human Rights Commissioner, but when I was appointed with the slang title of Freedom Commissioner, because there was a lot of criticism that the Human Rights Commission had perhaps not paid enough attention towards traditional human rights in favour of the aspirations of non-discrimination in the community. And so I was appointed very much to reassert from the new government that traditional human rights matter. They shouldn't be discarded just because they come into conflict with different social issues at different times, and so they've dubbed me the Freedom Commissioner, because they think that's a very good way of explaining to the public exactly how I'm going to defer to freedom above government power.
Your mission statement right now, Mr. Commissioner, how do you see your role come February 18th? What will be your duties, and how will you go about it?
Well, it's quite strange, because basically the role has no statutory power. I can't call inquiries or haul people before courts or anything like that. My job is essentially one of education and advocacy. And so in many ways it's very similar to my old role at the Institute of Public Affairs, which is to go out into the public, to explain to the public why human rights matter, how they're a central foundation stone that liberal democracy is built on, how they're a sacrosanct principle, and then how to get people to culturally adopt it in their view and attitudes towards how society should be governed. And Australia is quite strange in this regard, because we haven't come from abuses of power by the monarch like in England, or through revolutions like you have in the United States, including against foreign powers. We have a very strange experiment in liberal democracy. We don't have bills of rights. The greatest protection of people's human rights is at the ballot box. And so having a culture built on human rights matters so much in making sure that governments don't think they can get away with anything, and that the public can hold them to account at the ballot box when they do.
Tim, we've had the idea of a Human Rights Commission floated here in the United States. The Obama administration supports it. We have a Civil Rights Commission now. They want to transform it into the Human Rights Commission. Why did Australia's Human Rights Commission not protect human rights? Where did it go so wrong? Why do they need you in the first place?
Well, this is, it's actually quite fascinating, because when it comes down to it, human rights are a political concept. They come out of political philosophy, and increasingly they're being interpreted purely through legal instruments and international legal instruments like international treaties through the United Nations. Australia, and because we don't have a Bill of Rights in itself, they've always sat between the legal and the political here as well. And what I think has happened is that human rights activists increasingly in Australia have focused on them as purely legal concepts. And if you look through international treaties, they water down what human rights are, and they're approached from the idea that government gives you human rights. Whereas I come from a more philosophical position, which is no, governments are about stopping the abuse of power against the individual. And so there was a need to refocus the discussion back on that they don't come from government, that international treaties are all well and good, but if you don't have this idea within every citizen in the country that the purpose of human rights is to stop those people in Washington, or in our case in Canberra or our capital cities, telling us how to live our lives, then really the foundation stones of our liberal democracy are starting to buckle under the pressure.
That makes you a gadfly, a critic, an outspoken voice against the Abbott government if you if you believe that's necessary. Is that correct, Tim? You're not serving as a loyal member unless you say what you see.
That's correct. And part of the challenge I'm going to face is that human rights, of course, are very broad, and there are many issues that can be focused on. And it's how to craft an agenda, not just that you're going around and being critical of the government, but how do you build that culture and understanding of what human rights are. And that's part of the thing in the lead up to taking this role I'm grappling with at the moment, because there seem to be no end of suggestions about how that can be done. But it's really turning from just being critical of the government when they try and do things like shut down freedom of speech, like the previous parliament genuinely considered in the context of things that may insult or offend various different groups within the community, to heavily regulating or legislating what the press can say. Taking it from being critical of those things as they arise to then how do you start this course, or this essentially positive agenda of getting people to understand what human rights are and basically bringing into their understanding of everyday life.
Tim Wilson is the newly appointed, and on February 18th will become the Human Rights Commissioner of Australia. We congratulate him, and we look to conversation when he gets himself in trouble. Mary Kissel of the editorial board of the Wall Street Journal and the host of Opinion Journal each day at WSJ.com at 1 p.m. Australia, East Coast time. I'm John Batchelor.